Aloha, everyone, and welcome. It's great to see so many names turning up here that I know and a lot of people that I don't know. So, real happy to have you join us at Three Tales of Leadership today. Just be aware this is being recorded so that people that can't attend can watch it later. So, if you're uncomfortable with that, best to exit now. But we have a great session ahead. So, let's get into it. This is, I believe, the sixth of 8 APLP EWC alumni events designed to increase engagement amongst all of us that are part of the APLP alumni community. There are 2 more events after this one between now and September 19th, and you are a part of more than 50 East West Center alumni chapters globally. So thanks so much for making time today to come together and help strengthen our association. It's all about Ohana, as we know. And to remind any of you that don't know, we have more than 60,000 East West Center alumni around the world. So if you look where you are, there's probably a good chance there's an association or there's others around. And we're asking everybody this year, as we're disconnected, to connect. So reach out to someone, post something on Facebook, follow EWC, APLP, EWCA on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and make sure we grow and strengthen our connections. Wee bit of news, you've probably seen applications are open for APLP G20. So gone are the days where the year that APLP occurs matches with the generation, but G20 is a green light happening May 22nd to September 9th, 2022. You can see that it starts off with about 1 month of virtual pre-residency material. Then everyone's going to get together for almost 2 months in Hawaii. Then they will all go virtual again for about 2 weeks. So the application deadline is November 2nd. You've probably seen announcements via email. You can go to APLP website, pass it on to someone you know. A vast majority of successful candidates come from alumni. So tell people this is an exciting opportunity and really happy to see APLP get going again. Also, if you have a piece of news, that could be an invitation, you want to let somebody know about a publication, awards, or other things of relevance to the larger EWC alumni network, send an email to Christina and team at alumni@eastwestcenter.org, and there's a high likelihood they'll put it in the newsletter. Just a wee bit about session etiquette. I think everyone gets it, but we'll keep our microphones on silent. We're going to be together for about 90 minutes today. After each of the 3 presentations, we'll have a brief Q&A, and I'll ask you at that time to put any questions you might have in the chat dialogue just to keep things moving along. And afterwards, please share something about this, something you learned, something you found interesting, and hashtag it APLP or EWCA. Today's a bit different from the other sessions we've had in that we're sponsoring and giving $100 to each of these 3 charities. So each of your presenters today has specified one charity they'd like us to donate to. And in the case of all 3, they actually are involved in these charities as well. But I just want to tell you a bit about all 3 causes. Blue Dragon's Children's Foundation in Vietnam is a grassroots Australian charity serving children in crisis throughout the country. Blue Dragon kids are street kids, children with disabilities, and kids who've been trafficked. They rescue kids from danger and slavery, reunite them with their families when possible, and provide services needed for recovery and growth. Our third cause is in Bhutan, and it is Timbu Hub, a group of socially active, passionate young leaders from diverse backgrounds who meaningfully engage with the community for significant positive change. Focusing on socioeconomic issues, they aim to drive change with design thinking processes that are innovative, relevant, and action-oriented. And our third cause we're supporting today is in India, and that is Voice for Girls, an NGO that works with marginalized adolescent girls and boys in India. In the last decade, they've reached out to more than 100,000 adolescents by providing them with critical knowledge, life skills, and spoken English skills. Voice envisions a world where all girls are able to take charge of their futures by breaking the harmful cycle of socioeconomic and gender equality. So we're delighted again to be donating $100 to each of these 3. And thank you to those of you that reached out and made a suggestion that we do something like this and that we invite alumni to share their knowledge with us. So today we have three presenters doing kind of TED style presentations today. And I'll give a brief intro to each of them and then I'll turn it over for them to take control of the screen. Our first presenter is Thinley Choden. She is a G2 APLP alumni and she is based in Bhutan and her cause is the Timbu Hub. Thinley's enjoyed a career that spans from Bhutan to the US and India and across multiple disciplines and sectors. She's passionate about entrepreneurial solution building in climate change, green circular economy, governance, youth, and talent. She holds an executive certificate in strategic decision-making from Wharton Business School, an MPA and a certificate on disaster management and humanitarian assistant from University of Hawaii at Manoa, and a BA in economics with a minor in international relations from Beloit College in Wisconsin. Her presentation is Success and Significance, a Nuanced Transitioning. Speaking of transitioning, we'll just do a transition of screen sharing here and Thinley will share with you. So Thinley, you can take control of that screen now.
Thank you, Scott. Sorry, as I get around to
yeah, no worries, no rush. This is, we're on all ends of the planet here and it takes a little moment for us to transfer ownership and get things going. We can see your photo, Thinley, but we can't see your presentation yet, just so you know. Yeah, thanks everybody for your patience getting set up.
Moment, please bear with me. There you go. Can you see my screen share?
I see it, and if you can stretch it to cover more of the screen. Great. Well, Thinley, I look forward to hearing from you, and I'm just going to pause myself, and good luck. Enjoy, everybody.
Thank you. So let me just, can you guys see me as well? All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, APLP team, for having me here, and thank you, audience, for signing in and listening to our stories. So when Scott asked me to speak or be a speaker on this panel, I pondered about what might be the most relevant talk for the audience who've signed in. And I think as practitioners or students of leadership, we're all kind of trying to balance and do the best we can. And I figured that I should just maybe talk on this specific balancing and doing our best, what it means to ourselves and what it means to others. So hence my topic, or an elusive topic it may seem to some of you, Success and Significance, a Nuanced Transitioning. Is my, can you guys see my Zoom video or Zoom window or no?
I can see it, Thinley. Maybe one other person can confirm. I see your title screen.
Okay, but you can't see my others. Okay, fine.
Yeah, we can see you as well, Thinley.
All right, thank you. So, you know, my title, Success or Significance, a Nuanced Transitioning. This, I must actually first give credit to a talk I attended in this Acumen circle that I'm part of, where I first heard of this coupling of words and it made so much sense to me. And hence, since I have adopted and adapted it to my own introspection and learning and work. But before that, let me spend a few seconds on hope. I think it starts with hope. Hope is you, me, and us. It's an invitation to act. Leadership manifests hope in meaning and relevance, so we may arrive with hope. So this is a short thing I wrote, and I feel like hope is the bedrock of everything that we do. And therefore, I just wanted to start with hope, so we may arrive or end with hope. So back to success and significance. If you look at these words, it rather seems ordinary, but if you kind of stop and reflect upon it, it's quite profound. And I hope you find it so in the following slides. So success, you know, I think all of us should want and do want success. We work hard to attain it. It's not easy. We want to be successful because success begets success and it propagates our own brand and work. and success ultimately empowers and benefits us, the individuals. That's good, and we must all strive for success. So I'm sure you can relate, all of us can relate to the image that I put up there. The iceberg, success is like an iceberg. It takes a lot of work. But if you really stop and think about it, success is really for the individual, meaning like ourselves, so that we can better ourselves to do better work. But what kind of success? And not all successes are the same. And that kind of leads me to, what does success mean for others? So if success is for the self, significance is for others. So meaning, how significant has your success been for others, your community? In other words, impact. I think significance, the more commonly used term is impact, and is more importantly, its relevance to others or the community that you serve. And I think success and significance, if we are conscious and we're constantly keeping those two in mind, it leads to what I call, or what many are calling, the enduring success. So an article from the Harvard Business School, it says success that lasts. I just quoted this thing from that article: complexity of success. Success involves more than a heart-pounding race to the finish line. Research uncovered 4 irreducible components of enduring success. So one is happiness, the feeling of pleasure or contentment about your life. Achievement, accomplishments that compare favorably against similar goals others have strived for. Significance, so therefore, the word I've chosen as well. The sense that you've made a positive impact on people you care about. And legacy, a way to establish your values or accomplishments to help others find future success. So this is, I just found this thing within their article most relevant to my talk today. So just wanted to give that it is validated. So I hope this nuanced transitioning makes sense in a very kind of, I suppose, an ideological way, and what it means, at least what I see it means as I'm going through this journey of living or leadership. So leadership is self-reflection, introspecting on the choices we make while aspiring to be our higher selves, which ultimately have to be adapted and adjusted to the external environment for execution and action. This is not from Harvard Business School, this is my own articulation. And having talked about these concepts or these framings for ourselves, I figured I might as well put myself in those frames, and I'll give 3 examples of my own journey in terms of myself, what I call leveraging leadership moments. But before that, I think all of us have what I call a personal compass. Some may call it a matrix, personal matrix. But I see, the first 3 quite common across many of these leadership or personal growth thing, which is integrity, meaning why, the values that you live for or that you align to, and your purpose, and and the trust you want to build. The second one is competence, which is basically skills and knowledge and something that you can learn and keep building upon. And compassion, EQ, or our empathy or willingness to listen, learn, and act. But the other 2, which confidence and self-care, I don't see as much, but I feel is quite important. Confidence, not in the arrogant way, of course. Confidence, because if you have confidence as a leader, you provide or you extend strength and energy to your team or to the community that you're working for. And self-care, I think that's also very important. If you don't take care of self, then you can't essentially function to help or do the work that you're doing. And, the North Star, and my North Star is, I keep it pretty simple so I don't disappoint myself, is doing good and doing the best I can. So this is kind of like a personal compass that I myself use every now and then in terms of figuring my own work. So having said that, I'll give you 3 examples, like I said. My first example of my moments of leveraging leadership or being conscious of this to transitioning. It's my first job with the World Food Program. This was right after I finished and came back from Hawaii. I was part of APLP, Generation 2. I went into APLP right after my undergraduate degree. After I came back to Bhutan from APLP, I applied for a job that I saw with the World Food Program here in Bhutan and got it, and I was with it for 2 years. I looked after the school feeding program, or food for education. Now it's framed differently. But these 2 years of working in the UN was sort of a reorientation or a re-education about my own country to myself, because there are schools in Bhutan where you have to walk 7 days one way to get to the schools, and children have to walk 3.5 hours through thick forests, across mountains, crossing rivers, with the potential danger of wildlife, and in some areas infested with leeches, which is I'm very scared of leeches. So having seen that and having seeing firsthand what poverty means here in Bhutan, and is mostly defined, physical poverty, mostly defined by access to service or how rural you are. But in the face of all of that, just how parents and students, kids, walk this extra mile, take all this effort to go to school because they understand and they know that education is a way out, and education will enable them for upward social mobility, which they have seen and which they know can happen and have happened. And these are just some photos that I've taken of these schools, and it was many years ago, so I was trying to dig up some of my photos, but I really couldn't find some of the photos where you see the difficulty of getting to these schools. But you can see some of the classrooms are kind of makeshift. Some of the school structures are kind of old, but kids and students work hard to provide education. And I think that was sort of a reorientation, like I said, to what the reality is in Bhutan, in terms of rural Bhutan. And my work there, success in the sense I did well, I did good in the organization, but in terms of the significance, I looked after 170 schools impacting over 35,000 students all across the country, and I traveled the whole country. The country's made of 20 districts. So that left a profound impact on myself, and also kind of the work that I want to do moving forward. So I left I transitioned out, or I left the job 2005, and I went back to the East-West Center. I did my degree fellow. I was also a degree fellow, finished my master's, and I came back to Bhutan. And my second example is from working within an international organization that had the comforts of its institutional strength and brand, as well as the resources. I went and I started a nonprofit organization. I started Read Bhutan in 2008. And having worked, like I said, within an institutional, what an institution offers in terms of just resources and platform, working to start Read Bhutan was quite a different experience, because you had to do everything. I worked solo for many months trying to build up the organization, and that meant from cleaning the office in the morning to going and meeting the minister in the afternoon, Minister of Education, and all the other high officials to try and establish this organization here in Bhutan. And what READ does is, READ actually stands for Rural Education and Development. What READ does is we do innovative community work, whereby we work with grassroots rural communities to build community library and resource centers, or what's also called as READ centers. And it was the first of its kind when I started in 2008, whereby a concept of a library was almost an alien cultural concept, because Bhutan is an traditional oral society. So the presence of a library within a community was almost unheard of. And our literacy rate back then was about 54%, which is quite low. And now it's 65%, I think. So basically the older generations, most of them were not educated. And the younger generations, the literacy rate is quite high. So when I started this organization, there was a lot of resistance, obviously so, because they just didn't know what a library or what a read center is, because that just was a very new cultural concept or a cultural asset, so to speak. And over the years, I built a team, and now, working with different communities, now we have a network of 9 read centers. So Read Bhutan established the first network of rural community libraries. I transitioned out in 2016 because I felt that Read was strong as an institution, and that myself transitioning out and bringing in a new leadership would just add a different perspective and value for the organization. And also myself, I wanted to kind of explore and look at what I can do next. So I transitioned out in 2016, but Read Bhutan still exists. We still have programs. And if you see the photo, which is on my right, the white building with in a village setting, actually that's the first Read Center. It's a rural village in central Bhutan. And the one on the left, my left, with the branches in front of the house, that's the latest Read Center, which came after I left. And I was doing a work in southern Bhutan, and I was in that community, and I went and visited that Read Center. So it's the first and the latest Read Center. And now, kids know what a Read Center is. They love the reading, and even women, we provide a lot of livelihood programs through the Read Center. So it's become a mainstay within the community and a platform for them to empower themselves and do a lot of other activities that is need-based for them in their community. So my current mood, I think Scott has kind of already said it. We live in what everyone calls the convergence of 3 crises, right? The pandemic, climate change, and economic recession. But I say the climate change is a bigger threat, which we don't see very upfront. But COVID-19, of course, is very near and real for us. So that takes, that takes precedence for a lot, which should. But I think we are headed towards a more challenging future. So I now function as a social entrepreneur and a consultant, and I like to call or describe myself as working within an ecosystem portfolio of work that does work in climate change, entrepreneurship, and youth engagement. And with that mood, I think this is the model or the big picture we should all be looking at, rather than most of the current models that you see. I think the environment or climate is the overall holding space for us, within which then comes the society and economy should actually cater or work towards sustaining our climate and our human civilization. We shouldn't be working towards sustaining the structures as we see in terms of our economy, world economy or global economy. So having said that, an example of the third example from my current work, one of the things I do, like Scott has already mentioned, I started the Global Shapers Thimphu Hub. The Global Shapers community is a youth initiative within the World Economic Forum. It was started in 2011, and there are over 435 hubs across 150 countries. And the Thimphu Hub is the first Global Shapers Hub in Bhutan. And I started it I started doing the work in February, and I managed to recruit about 9 talented young people. And we had the first hub meeting in April. So for a hub, we say our starting month was April 2020. So this is a voluntary youth group, and it's city-based or place-based, so proximity, because proximity is important because you can relate to the things you do. And this photo was the first hub meeting, and we had 9 members. And since starting last year, I have transitioned out. In June this year, we had successful hub elections, and the young had taken over. So we have an elected curator and vice curator. An example of some of the activities that we have done so far. During lockdown, we had a month-long lockdown. We did this campaign online called Mask or Make and Sue Kindness, where we talked about proper mask wearing and how to wash a mask and how to have it safe. Then another program that's been quite popular is called Wyndham Learns. Basically, it's financial literacy or financial knowledge for young people, how they can start planning and being financially disciplined and thinking about the future. We have content online. Also, we have a podcast that is aired every couple of weeks. Then we had a successful round of what is called the Davos Lab Dialogue. So it's the Davos, it's an initiative globally of the Global Shapers community, the Davos Agenda, which is a very global thing, bringing it down to the grassroots by the youth, designed by the youth at the grassroots within their community. So rather than going up, down, going bottom up. So the Thimpo Hub participated in this as well, and we held 4 dialogues, on the pillar, on the future of politics, net zero, digital literacy, and conscious consumerism. And we managed to get other institutional partners, Bhutan Foundation, WWF, and a few other NGOs. And we also have this program called Her Health, where we talk about not only the female reproductive health, but also just young boys and girls growing up. What are some of the changes? What are some of the boundaries you have to set yourself, and how do you engage with each other? And what's healthy relationship? Currently, some of the programs that we have is called College and Career Readiness. And this is some of the sessions we have, and we're doing climate action workshop with the UN for college students. So this is, sorry, let me go back. So this is kind of the 3 examples of my transitioning, I suppose, of success and significance, and some of the things I've done over the years. And this is just some random thing I threw in there. It's just food for thought. I don't know if you guys follow Seth Godin. He gives out this very bite-sized blog post, and I just somehow just could identify with that. If I'm going over time, please let me know. I can see some chats coming up, but my screen is a bit too small to coordinate all of that. Just turn on the volume and please tell me that I'm over time if I am. So who are you really? There's a desire to celebrate our authentic self, but perhaps a considered self, the one that shows up when we are doing our best to be consistent, generous, and professional. That's the authentic self. The voice that slips out when we are tired, stressed, or busy is simply an incomplete and lesser version of who we actually are. We are the sum total of the interactions we choose to create and the changes we contribute. So anyhow, these 2 blog posts just kind of made sense to me, and I just put it in this. The other one, I will not read it. It's a bit longer, but anyhow, it's about certainty, accuracy, and leadership. And maybe more than certainty, we should focus on accuracy because of just so many things changing in this current day and time. So, having said all of this, I thought, since we're talking leadership, I'll just talk about my inspiration of who leadership and leaders. Like, leadership is the doing or the doing or the function of a leader. But in terms of a leader, who am I inspired with? My hero or my inspiration for moral leadership, responsible leadership is my king here in Bhutan. And of course, like I said, proximity and relevance is always more impactful. So our king, Jigme Namgyal Wangchuk, during this time of crisis, COVID and the pandemic, and the country facing a lot of issues, he's literally been what I call a frontline king. He's born a king, but he don't necessarily have to be out in the front line because he's born with privilege. But nonetheless, he's never stayed one day in his comforts of his palace during the pandemic. He's constantly been putting himself at risk and going at these high risk, COVID risk areas in the South and making sure that the frontliners are doing work, and his presence brings them inspiration. And he's been on several trips. He's never stayed here in the capital. And more than that, our Prime Minister, who works with His Majesty the King, our leadership is a science-based leadership. So during this COVID time, it's really been driven by just knowing what the virus does, and how we can protect ourselves. And His Majesty has provided relief to many businesses and families through his own welfare fund. Even I run a travel company, and tourism has been highly impacted. So even my company, especially my staff, they've availed to the services, and they're grateful for the financial relief that they're receiving from His Majesty's welfare fund. And recently, His Majesty has been selling stocks, his own welfare fund stock, to again liquidate so that he can help more families and businesses. And Desung is a voluntary network of people who sign up to be trained, and Desung basically means Guardians of Peace, and they're all in orange uniform. So they've been pretty much the mainstay of the whole frontline work in collaboration with our health workers as well as our police and other armed forces. But Desung was again started by His Majesty. I'm actually also part of that network. I signed up and trained to be a DSUP. And in the early days of the pandemic, I volunteered and did a lot of community work. But as it got worse, they wanted more technically skilled and trained DSUPs in. So I just wanted to share a few pictures to put into context. So this photo, again, the guy in the front is our Prime Minister. The guy at the back is our king. They've walked the length and breadth of the country during this time to make sure that things are okay, people are okay, people are safe. This is during a flood that happened in the middle when people were in the country and the world was obviously suffering from COVID. We had a flood and it wiped out a lot of homes and businesses. His Majesty went down to the flood side right away to meet with the families. This is His Majesty again up in the north. You can see the orange uniforms back there. Those are the DSUPs, the border patrolling to make sure, because we're in between India and China and the border is quite porous. So border patrolling was very important. And the guy in the black behind him is our prince, his younger brother. So this is His Majesty the King here, and that's his brother. Again, this is during one of his trips up in the north. Bhutan is very rural, so you have to walk if you want to get to the rural parts. Again, His Majesty is giving a thumbs up to the DSUPs, so who are patrolling the borders, and the other guy is his brother. This is in the south, in the rain and in the heat, and both of them are thoroughly drenched. The one in black is His Majesty, and this one is his other brother. So, he walks at night, visiting homes, making sure families are okay, things are good. And this photo actually went quite viral in the country. This was His Majesty doing one of the chores that he took rest, and he was eating lunch, packed food. And this just goes to show just the breadth and the heart, the work that His Majesty is putting in on this, And I just wanted to kind of show this was His Majesty before the pandemic. And the years of pandemic, his worry and thing, this is him now. You can just see on his face just the stress and that he's been carrying for the whole country and doing. And thanks to him and the Prime Minister and his government, this is the latest COVID update. So far in the whole country, we've only had 2,596 confirmed cases. 2,577 has recovered. We have only had 3 deaths, and currently active cases are only 16. And today is 22 days of no community transmission. So this is quite a relief for us in terms of controlling the COVID pandemic within our country.
Well,
And
maybe
of course,
ask you to wrap up in the next minute or so if you can, Thinley.
Sure. Yep, I'm almost done. And this is obviously thanks to his family, the Queen and his 2 sons who sacrificed their father and husband for the country. And just want to end with this. I don't know how many of you know Lynette Walworth, but what she wrote, I attended a talk that she was giving, and I literally, as she was talking, I took these notes down, and I thought what she said, what she articulated made so much sense. And that on the topic of why we need more leaders from different backgrounds. So if you belong to the dominant culture, that means you never have to explain yourself. Being the person who's not from the dominant culture in that room means that once you try to shift into that zone, you're in constant internal conversation around how to translate yourself to that room so you're understood. And often that means you're kind of shape shifting. We can be trying to pull our experiences into a language which gets us heard, understood. I think of art, especially when it comes from real life, from true story or experiences, the lifting of the personal to universal. And so you are automatically in a training of thinking, which brings everyone into that room with you. And I think there is something very beneficial there as a way of thinking. It is not about talking to, it's actually an attempt to talk with. Creating more diversity in leadership will hopefully mean that we all have moments of uncomfortability or discomfort where we are quizzically trying to understand what that person is saying because they experience their cultural background and their understanding. Their way of moving through the world is different to mine. So with that, I end. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't take too much of time from the other speakers.
Thank you. Everyone join me in giving a nice virtual mahalo to Thinley. Thanks, Thinley. A couple of good questions that came in here we'll ask you to voice up on is, this one comes from Caitlin. Do you have a few tips for keeping volunteers engaged, especially during COVID when we can't travel or meet in person?
So what's worked for me is staying engaged because like I said, because of COVID, is my screen share stopped? Okay. So because of COVID, everything was online. So what I found useful was getting on Slack and creating that community, especially with my global shapers, creating that community where we're constantly engaging and messaging each other. But what's also been helpful is scheduling regular meetings. You know, out of the 10, even if 5 shows up for one meeting, you still schedule that meeting and still have that moment of engagement with each other and check-in. So that's been very useful. But in terms of the larger engagement of volunteerism, I think, you know, designing projects with them that speaks to what they're passionate about is very useful and helpful, because if they're passionate about it, they will definitely be engaged. And it's a lot of working with to think about what's the most relevant project or what's an issue that we can work on.
That's great. And the next question we'll take, Thinley, that came to my mind as well, is I know when I work with leaders, they all have difficulty delegating. And Anusha asks, you brought in a really important point in your talk, the power to let go of something, as was the example with Reed and your latest venture. She's asked, could you share a bit about the inner battles you may have faced and the challenges that continue in letting go of things and entrusting others?
Yeah, so delegation, I had to learn it the hard way when I started Reed Bhutan, because Reed Bhutan was pretty much, I felt like it was my baby. And, you know, I invested 6 years, 24/7 around the clock in Reed Bhutan. But as the organization grew, kind of used, again, introspection and kind of stopping and looking at, okay, what is it that you want? You know, trying to zoom out from this kind of very attached thing to kind of the big picture of, okay, what would you like to ultimately see Reed Bhutan to be, or whatever organization it is that you're working on. And your answer is most of the time you want it to prosper, you want it to grow, you want it to have more impact. So, you know, I started my process of letting go or transitioning out of Reed Bhutan 18 months before I actually did. And you just it's also, you have to transition out responsibility. You just can't say, okay, all right, goodbye, take it over. You kind of have to put in all the structures within, and all the, whether it's the board, whether it's the team, whether it's just making sure there's projects in the pipeline, partnerships in the pipeline, and kind of doing that. So Read Bhutan has really been my teacher in terms of letting go and delegating. But I would say the important components of the factors of that is, if you're building for an organization, is getting the right talent, which obviously is a very big challenge, whether it's a nonprofit or a business. I think getting the right talent and kind of growing them, nurturing them, and trusting them, and delegating them projects, whether they're good or bad, they do good or make mistakes, let them fix it. So that's kind of what's helped me in terms of transitioning and letting go and delegating. And Global Shapers, it's a self-selected group of very young and talented people, and it's very little I need to do. They take it on themselves and they do it, and they really truly live up to the spirit of self-organizing, self-initiative, and solution building.
Thanks so much, Thinley. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your weekend to share this with us. Hiroko, I'm sorry, we're going to have to move on, but if we have time, we will come back to Hiroko's question in the chat. So thank you so much. We now welcome our second of three speakers. Aloha to Caitlin Wyndham of G9. She's from Australia, but she is based in Hanoi, Vietnam, I believe. And her cause is Blue Dragon Children's Foundation, which I think you're going to hear lots about. She's originally from New South Wales in rural Australia, and upon graduation from the Australian National University, she enjoyed a brief stint in the public service, then moved to nonprofit work in Western Sydney. In 2001, she moved to live and work in Vietnam, where she served a number of different NGOs and international organizations focused on issues related to inequality and inclusion. Since 2016, Caitlin has been working full-time with Blue Dragon, leading the development of anti-human trafficking programs across the organization. She holds a master's in international and community development, also a master's degree in sociology, and a PhD in public policy. Please give a nice warm welcome to Caitlin with Human Trafficking, who are the perpetrators and why are people vulnerable? And we'll now just do a little transition here. Caitlin.
Thanks so much, Scott. And yeah, thanks to everyone for coming along today and joining us in this session. So Scott, that's really useful. Thank you for the introduction. I don't need to focus on that now, so I'll get straight into it. I actually have quite a lot of facts and figures in this presentation. So before I start on those facts and figures, I would like to tell you a story. And this story is...
Caitlin, I'm sorry, we can't see your screen if you've got a PowerPoint deck.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think up on the top middle of your screen, there's a share button.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, thank you for interrupting.
There we go.
Okay. So now you can see. Great. Yeah, so the story I want to tell you is about Lua. So when she was 21 years old, she was trafficked to China. She accepted a job offer, but it was fraudulent, and she ended up in a forced marriage in China. And she was lucky, however, she was rescued in January of last year. Lua is a Hmong woman, similar to 20% of the total 1,600 victims that Blue Dragon has rescued and helped to return to Vietnam. And this is significant because Hmong people are a very small ethnic minority in Vietnam. They only make up 1.4% of the total population, but they're massively overrepresented in the trafficking statistics. So Lua, like many Hmong people, was very poor. And she lived in a very remote village in a remote province on the border of China. Like many others in her village and actually in the province, she had limited education. She left school quite early and got married quite early as well. The area she lives in is very beautiful, as you can see from the photos, but it's a very tough environment, and most families rely on agriculture, which is not at all simple, as you can see here. It requires actually planting crops in between the rocks up the sides of mountains. So it's a very harsh environment, and it's very difficult to even grow enough food to eat in this province. It's also very vulnerable to natural disasters like drought and floods, and these are getting worse because of climate change. There's also, because it's quite remote, the area is poorly serviced by health and other public services. And most children have to attend boarding school from a very young age, usually around 7 or 8 years old, because there's just not enough schools. So they have to travel to the nearest town and attend boarding school to be able to get schooling. So I visited Lua, and her house is 3 hours drive from the district capital, then another 2 hours by motorbike on this road. And then once you get, the road sort of stops, and then you walk up the side of the mountain for about 3/4 of an hour to get to her house. So it is extremely remote. But as I said, Lua was quite lucky. She was rescued and was able to return home. But she returned back to the same poverty and disadvantage that she'd left. She was, however, fortunate in that area, Blue Dragon had trained some social workers, local social workers from the local women's union. And one of those social workers took on her case and visited her to help her reintegrate. So with support from the training from Blue Dragon and from the government, Lua was able to successfully apply for her personal ID card, which she'd never had, and health insurance for her and her whole family, and a birth certificate for her new baby. We also were able to help Lua to purchase a cow, which, you know, might not seem like much, but in this environment, having one cow and being able to breed it and sell the offspring makes a huge difference to the income. It can increase a family's income by 25 to 30%. So it makes a big issue, makes a big difference. But we didn't stop with that. Blue Dragon, we've also been working at the provincial level with the local government authorities to ensure that survivors of trafficking can be identified as a survivor of trafficking. This might seem like a simple process, but in fact, it's actually often very difficult to prove that they're a victim of trafficking as opposed to some other sort of crime or an illegal migrant, for example. So it requires investigation by the police, and the guidelines that govern the process, the laws around that are quite complicated, and they're not very well explained. So it's very difficult. Lua, again, was lucky because she'd been rescued. There was evidence, and the police were able to investigate her case, and she was identified formally by the police as a victim. The next step was then that she gets referred to the social welfare agencies, who are tasked to provide financial assistance and other support. Again, this might seem simple, but in fact, before Blue Dragon started working in the province, no survivors had received any social support. Some had been identified as victims, but they hadn't actually, the referral process hadn't worked, and there weren't people on the ground who could provide any follow-up support or make sure that the financial assistance got to the victim. So this grassroots work and the training and the, you know, often we were just getting the people together in the same room with the welfare agencies and the police, and just working out how does the referral work, you know, on a very specific level. Lua was lucky. She was one of the first to receive assistance, and she received 3 million dong, which is about $130. Because the police had managed to successfully rescue her trafficker, so Blue Dragon lawyers represented her in court, and she was awarded compensation equivalent to about $430, and she actually received that as well. So Lua has done quite well. And she's now, happily back with her kids and her husband, and they're doing a lot better than they were. So this is just one story and just one survivor. Since 2007, Blue Dragon has rescued over 1,600 victims. And we've recently been able to analyze all the data to find out what is driving the vulnerability. The vast majority of victims of human trafficking in Vietnam, the main problem that's affecting Vietnamese people at the moment is the trafficking of women and girls to China, largely into forced marriages. In the past, there was also quite a lot of trafficking into the sex industry. That doesn't seem to be as much of a problem now, although it does still happen. The majority of victims, therefore, are female. Another reason for this is that women can be affected by both labor trafficking and various forms of sex trafficking. So they tend to be overrepresented in the statistics. However, we also know that many men are not identified, and therefore they're not in the statistics. They often, victims of labor exploitation, will often not identify themselves as a victim of trafficking, and they'll never end up in the statistics. So we need to take that huge percentage of women with a little bit of a grain of salt. There's probably a lot of male victims there who are not in the statistics. And as I mentioned, more than 50% of the victims are ethnic minority people, even though they only make up 15% of the total population. So from that, we can really see that poverty, disadvantage, and exclusion, as well as gender inequality, is driving human trafficking. And that's, I mean, I guess we knew that already, but it's very nice to have some numbers and some data to put on that. The majority of victims, the biggest age danger range, which is probably unsurprising because it's the key age for labor and for sexual exploitation, is people between 18 and 29. About 35% were children when they were rescued, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's not a reflection of the number who were children when they were trafficked, because many of them are in trafficking for a very long time. And so they may well have been children when they're trafficked, but then rescued after some years. So this is a very, very tragic story that, victims are being trafficked into forced marriages, they're being exploited, they're extremely vulnerable. We don't have complete data. This is only the data from one NGO. The best estimate is that there's about 400,000 Vietnamese in modern slavery, which includes all forms of exploitation, including commercial sexual exploitation, forced marriages, labor exploitation, forced surrogacy, every form of human trafficking. So this is a huge number. And we can see that, this problem is really affecting specific communities quite severely. These are communities that are very disadvantaged, and they're really suffering from this issue. But what's even more tragic is that many of the traffickers are in the exact same situation as their victims. They are also largely poor, ethnic minority, disadvantaged people. Now, this is new data that we've been able to analyze just over 100 court cases. So it's a fairly large data source, but it's highly biased because, of course, by definition, this only includes traffickers who've been caught and prosecuted. So on the whole, the majority of these traffickers are the low-level recruiters. It's not it's only the people on the Vietnamese side of the border, of course, because we can't prosecute people on the other side of the border, in China or in Myanmar. So it is a very biased sample, and you need to keep that in mind, but it's the best we've got. And there's very little other information about the nature of traffickers. So this is really significant information. So What the information shows is that just exactly the same as the victims, in fact, even more of the traffickers are from ethnic minority groups. And Hmong people account for 33% of those traffickers. So what we know, we knew anecdotally, but now we really have statistics to show it, is that most people are being trafficked by people they know, their neighbor, their stepfather, or an uncle, or even in a couple of cases, their schoolmates. And these traffickers tend to be young, they tend to be from the same communities, and they tend to be just as poor as their victims. They're also similarly disadvantaged. The vast majority hadn't finished school. And most of them, almost 80%, were arrested after their first violation. So we may have from movies and from all the discussion, we have this picture of a trafficker as a really big mafia guy in a suit, earning huge amounts of money and trafficking thousands of women. In fact, in these particular cases, of course that does exist, but in these particular cases, much of the trafficking is done by neighbours and extended relatives, and it's opportunistic. It's people trying to make a small amount of money to feed their families. And in fact, the average amount of money received was just under $1,600 US. So we're really not talking big funds here. And quite a few of these traffickers who ended up prosecuted didn't even receive any money because they were either caught in the act or they were tricked by other traffickers higher up the line. So we can really see that these people are highly vulnerable. They're not mafia criminal kingpins. They're desperate ethnic minority people. So what does all this mean? And why should you care? And, we're not all working in human trafficking, I understand that, but I think there's a lot of interest in the issue. So that's why I wanted to focus on this information. I think, Blue Dragon, now we're really trying to lead the way and provide leadership here to end human trafficking in Vietnam. By providing the grassroots services in collaboration with government here in Vietnam, we've learned a lot of qualitative information about what works and how we can actually help individual survivors and prevent trafficking on the ground. And that's where stories like the story of Lua's come in very useful, because they show us, what kind of interventions are required and what kind of support works for survivors. Oh, sorry. We also now, as I've just shown you very briefly, we have a lot of statistical evidence about the problem. And don't worry if you didn't have your note-taking out. All of these reports are available on our website, so you can get all this information in a lot more detail from our website. So Blue Dragon, now we've tried a lot of different things to prevent trafficking in many different provinces and in different environments. We've learned a lot about how to support survivors when they return. We directly have a team of social workers and psychologists who specialise in helping survivors of trafficking. And now we've also worked with government social workers, providing training and helping them to learn the skills to be able to support survivors in the community, living in the community, which is really important because that's where the survivors want to live. So, and now as I said, we have a lot of statistical information. So what's the next step in our leadership? We really want to demonstrate these models in more different provinces, to expand the work we've done and to replicate successful models that we now know that they're successful. We also need to be able to link this up with other programs, like regular poverty reduction programs. We can see that poverty is driving trafficking. Vietnam already has a lot of successful poverty reduction programs. We should be linking our trafficking work with those programs. Also with other initiatives trying to address gender inequality. and traditional exploitative practices that do continue, unfortunately. So we really aim to we aim to ensure that the government and other NGOs, other agents can learn from our experiences, not by hearing what works, but by actually seeing and learning from what works. There are some lessons, I think, that can be useful in other fields around this. If we really want to make a difference, we want to be able to show leadership and lead people to change. We need to be very well informed about our problem. We need to understand the problem with statistics, but also on the ground. And Thinley spoke about this as well. You know, you really need to be out there and understand what's going on at a very concrete level, and to be able to build that into the interventions and into policy change. We need to be able to try different things, fail at some, and learn from what works. We also need collaboration, and this is true, you know, this is just a no-brainer, of course. We need to work with other civil society organizations. We need to work with government. No one can solve any of these huge problems like climate change and human trafficking and poverty on our own. You know, pilots also are rarely good enough. Pilots are generally too short and too small, and they only show how things work in one area or with specific scope conditions. What we're trying to do is to show in rural mountainous areas, this is what works. In a disaster-prone lowlands area of Vietnam, this is how it works. We need to change it slightly. We need to show in southern Vietnam, how does it work? What kinds of goods? So we need extended pilots and multiple demonstrations. And we need to then inspire people. And this is what we're now at. We need to inspire money to flow. We need to inspire more people to be involved. We need to inspire communities on the ground that they can solve their own problems, and that we can guide them to show them what works. And now I'm going to end, and thank you all very much. Happy to take some questions if there's time.
Great job and inspiring work, Caitlin. We've got some good questions here. Christina Monroe, whoever that is, says how important, she really enjoyed the data you presented, and she's wondering how important is having data to guiding your work, assuming it's key to fundraising?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It is important, and it is important for fundraising, but I guess we only now have data. For the last 15, 20 years, we haven't had good data, and yet we've been able to raise funds. So it's great if you can show data that illustrates the problem that you're trying to solve and really shows the scale of the problem. But often data is just not available, or it's not good enough. So I think we especially, you know, in terms of raising funds from individuals or from companies, we find that stories are actually more effective. Many individuals might say that they really want to, you know, focus on the problem that has the biggest impact and the solution that has the most effect. But in reality, we're mainly governed by emotions, and stories are a very important part of that. So, you know, the Hawaiian talk story approach is also very effective along with data.
Great, fantastic. Hiroko-san has a question. She said, what is the stand from the Chinese government about bringing all these young people to China? Isn't there any international law to help control this and combat it?
There's not international laws, and the laws in China are not that strong, unfortunately. There are many people in China who are very concerned about this problem, and there are interventions on the other side of the border. I can also see there's a question about transborder cooperation and stuff. We actually don't officially work in China. As most of you will know, being an NGO registered and working in China is very, very difficult and complicated, and we don't have any presence in China. We don't have any official permission to work in China. So what we're doing is quite informal. And of course, the Chinese authorities know what we're doing, and they, we have many people in China who collaborate with us, but it's all very much under the radar. It's informal and it's based on relationships. It's not that we have no official permission to work there. So I think, yes, strengthening the laws is really important. And if there's more international collaboration, that's really important. And we're trying to facilitate that between the Chinese and Vietnamese police, for example, so that we can, wherever we can, we try and facilitate those connections. And it is definitely a priority for both governments, and they're doing what they can, but more is needed.
Okay, and we'll take one more question before moving on to our final speaker, and that is from Cynthia in Singapore. She says, what leadership does it take to steer the organization to the potential of the intersectional approach you speak of?
That's a huge question to finish with. but yeah, I mean, leadership is super important. We have very inspirational leaders at Blue Dragon, but we also we have a very what is maybe unusual. We build a collective and collaborative leadership throughout the organization. So it's not just about the top managers or the founder, inspiring others. We try to encourage all our staff at every level to be leaders and to take responsibility for their work and decision making at their levels. So in that way, we empower the whole organization to work towards the same goal. So we have a very clear goal. We have a very clear roadmap, for example, to end trafficking. This is what we're doing. We're all pulling to achieving this goal. And that way we can inspire the whole organization to be leaders and to make decisions that so that we're all working together, and there's the power of the whole organization, not just one leader trying to do it all.
Fantastic presentation and incredible work you and your colleagues do. Thank you so much. And everyone give a virtual mahalo to Caitlin. Thank you so much.
Thanks all.
So our third and final presenter today, we got to give a big aloha, and I'm going to give an apology because I think I'm going to butcher your last name, is from G13, residing in India, Anusha Bharadwaj, and she believes in the power of youth leadership to transform communities and nations. It's with this conviction that Anusha leads a group of passionate individuals at Voice for Girls, an NGO that strives to eliminate gender inequalities by educating and empowering marginalized adolescent girls and boys. To amplify the unheard voice of women, she also co-hosts a podcast, Woman Talk, and has presented at TEDx Women Hyderabad, where she shared about amplifying the need for feminist education. And today, she is going to present on feminist leadership lessons I would tell my younger self. So give a big welcome to Anusha, and I will hand over screen control to you, Anusha.
Hello, everybody. Very warm aloha to everyone who joined us today, whether it's a Saturday night or a Sunday morning. Thank you so much. Thank you, Scott. And it's an absolute honor to be here and share stage with Thinley and Caitlin. And I hope that after such fantastic presentations, I will hold fort here myself. I'm going to share what the past few decades in my life has been. Can you see my screen, everybody?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so this year 2021 was supposed to be a very momentous year. It is a very momentous year. I was going to turn 40, and in January 2020 I said, okay, I'm going to turn 40 next year. I have a beautiful partner who supports everything I do, a family that loves me. I have a beautiful son. I was expecting another child, an organization that I had built and I loved. And I said, okay, when I turn 40 in 2021, I'm going to do something really spectacular. So I said, I'm going to be on a cycling tour in Tuscany, And I would be going from one winery to the other, tasting amazing wine. And the world had different plans for the world itself. I think we just transformed in 2022 a whole new world, and 2021 continued to be that way. So 12th July 2021, when I turned 40, it was nothing like I had imagined in this wine tour that I should have been. My entire family was down with COVID. My older parents, my 1-year-old, my 5-year-old, me and my partner. And the only alcohol that was allowed was sanitizers that we had to constantly rub on our hands. But it was a beautiful time for me to pause and reflect, because I was not lost in tasting wine, but had an opportunity to see what my last 4 decades have been. And it was through the feminist lens that I have started living my life with. So I'm going to share a few of those stories from my life. And I hope that that is useful to all of us who have turned here as well. I will start from the early days, and I think no child should be welcomed in the world like I was. So I was born into a very traditional family where for generations, the first child that was born was always a boy. So sons are preferred. So my mother held me in her hands and was very anxious because I broke the tradition. I was the firstborn, but I was a girl. My father didn't come to see me for the first 10 days of my life because he was very disappointed. And he finally came in because tradition said that my father had to come and name me. And he always tells and recounts the story to say that when he came and he saw me for the first time, he fell in love so irrevocably that he promised to stand up for me at every instance that he could. So the entire first decade of my life was a lot of struggle to have my voice matter, especially because I was, again, the only girl amongst my brother and all the cousin brothers that I had. So it was in this context that I lived my first years, and I learned my first feminist lessons here in terms of, patriarchy is very huge. And I think what my parents did for me was just remove one brick of patriarchy at a time whenever they stood up for me. And also, looking back, I feel that, when we look at feminist allies, we only think of women, but there are patriarchal women who uphold patriarchy, and my family is full of that. But you have feminist men, and it was my father who stood up for me for the first time that made it possible. So we need to find our own allies in this journey of creating a feminist world. And I think the struggles continued. Adolescence is anyway a very complicated age, and it was the same for me. But this was also when I was at the peak of, doing anything that somebody said a girl cannot do. So I would climb trees, I played sports. In fact, I represented the state in the sport of cricket. I would never cry. I felt crying was a sign of weakness, and only girls did it. And I was not that kind of a girl. And I pursued science. In fact, my mother motivated me to pursue science because somebody said, well, girls can't be engineers, and just let her do some arts and get her married at the first instance you can. So I said, no, I'm going to be a chemical engineer. So as I was coming close to 20s, I was playing cricket for the state. I was pursuing my chemical engineering. I was, scoring well, but I just didn't like what I was doing. And I felt there was something missing. And I started volunteering for organizations that work with children. And I think that was my first steps towards, going towards the development sector, really, liking what I did. So the lessons I learned was from my mother. She still is a huge inspiration. But what she taught me in this decade was that, you can be a silent warrior. You can, fight your struggles without calling attention to it. She pursued her education because she believed that that's her way of getting outside the traditional roles that the family expected from her. She was working. She was one of the only working women in my family. She was a passionate educator. She acquired 2 master's degrees and a PhD, all this while raising children, cooking for and caring for the family. And she continued her journey and retired as a principal of a teacher training institute. So she continues to remain my pillar of strength and support. But the other thing I learned is you don't have to prove anything to anyone. So I had become an engineer, but I really didn't have my heart to it. And I said, no, I'm going to, look at what I want to do for myself without having to make a point to prove something to somebody else. So then I think I started my young adulthood into, wanting to be the woman that I, aspired to be. I joined the development sector for the first time. As a professional, I said, okay, I'm going to work with communities. And the first few years was just joyfully inspiring because I realized that what I gave was so less to what I got in return from these communities. They had so much lesser in terms of resources and opportunities than me, but they had so much more in terms of wisdom and resilience. And I learned so much. So this decade saw me grow from being a young person, being passionate about doing something in the impact, in terms of impact in communities, to being a professional who acquired skills to be able to catalytically transform communities. And I saw myself working with grassroots organizations, working with even, at the state level with UNICEF, where we rolled out a program that reached out to 10 million children in terms of school health. And I realized that I have the skills to be able to positively impact communities, but also do it at scale, which, like Caitlin said, it is not enough to just do things in pilot, but to be able to roll out. In fact, this program I led was launched in 2009, and it continues to work in the States even now, where the books that we've designed in terms of recording school health still continues to be followed across 2 states in the country. So it taught me the importance of doing things at scale. And this decade also saw me find my partner, and I think it was really important when I was reflecting to say that he met me at a time when I was so unsure of myself, because all through my childhood I learned that I'm not good enough. And here was this guy who completely was enamored by my work and by me. And I kept thinking to myself, he's too good to be true, and this is just not going to work. So what I learned is in this decade that it's okay to break away from what gender confirmations the society wants you to be. Because if I had conformed to what the expectations were from a girl from my family, I would not be the woman I am today. And it also taught me that, to be able to truly love somebody else, we must also learn to love ourselves. So I learned that loving myself is as important, and loving myself the way I am. And people who care for me should respect me for who I am, not who I should be. So the last decade of my life, the 30s to 40, I think, was the time when I realized that, a self-aware woman doesn't just show up for herself, but she shows up for others as well. So when I turned 30, the first thing I did was ink my body with the gender symbol of a woman, because I wanted to celebrate. For the first time, I felt proud and not ashamed of being a girl. And that began the journey of showing up for others. And I think it was during this time I had spent almost a decade plus working in the development sector, working with children especially. And I knew that I really had a passion for working with girls and health and education. And I think the first seeds of Voice for Girls, the organization that I lead now and I'm proud of, were sown at the East West Center at the APLP, where I think I found my tribe, I found my community, and I also realized that my voice mattered, and I need to own up for the future that I want to lead. So before I get into what Voice does, I'd like to just give you a brief context of what it means to be a girl in a rural part of India, where growing up can be a traumatic experience, because she doesn't have, an adolescent girl doesn't have information about why her body is changing. There are a lot of social and cultural expectations, and she's also living in a vulnerable socioeconomic context. And so all of this leads her to a very complicated and complex age in her life. She's probably already, unhealthy and has less hygiene. She's going to, have a first period. And when that happens, most likely she's going to drop out of school because schools, one, do not have the infrastructure to, have children who have their periods. There is no bathroom, there's no running water, there's no menstrual hygiene practices. But at the same time, there is expectations from the girl to drop out and start, understanding what it means to be, take care of household chores. And if she's dropped out of school, most likely she's married before the age of 18, which is the legal age for girls to marry in India. If she's married and she has no skills because she's dropped out very early, she's dependent on the family, so she also doesn't know her rights. She's highly vulnerable to domestic violence and abuse, and she does not have the freedom to make decisions for her because she's again dependent on the family she's married into. And what does the data say? Half the adolescent girls in India are already anemic. 60% of girls in the adolescent age are already out of school. So 66% are already not accessing any sort of formal education. And if she has dropped out of school, 72% of girls who drop out will remain illiterate the rest of their life. So they will not have an opportunity to go back to any kind of education. 45% of the girls who drop out will be married before they're 18. And it also means that 1/5 of all children that are born in India are born to young mothers who are under the age of 18. And if she doesn't know her rights, she doesn't know that, she can face violence and how to stand up for her rights. And in fact, if she's married, she thinks it's okay for her husband to beat her because that's his right. And you can see that she has very low skills to contribute economically. So the worker participation rate is in India for women is one amongst the lowest in the world. And this cycle will continue because 80% of children under the age of 3 are malnourished in India. They are born already to mothers who are unhygienic and unhealthy to begin with and are anemic to begin with. And they are also born before the mother is physically and emotionally ready to have a child. So there is a circle of denial. I call this a circle of denial because at every stage she's being denied her rights to live a life full of potential. And the only way to break this is, I think, when programs like Voice for Girls comes in. So when a girl attains a puberty, if she receives information from an organization like Voice for Girls that helps her understand and cope with growing up, she will get the right information at the right time, be able to plan her future, and hence be able to negotiate to stay in school. And if she stays in school, what really happens is she's delaying marriage. She's able to keep herself safe. She's able to negotiate to pursue higher education. She's able to pursue a financially independent life and make informed choices for herself and her family and her body. And she becomes a decision maker, and hence she contributes to the family economically as well. And she becomes a leader and a change maker. So that in essence is what Voice for Girls can do in transforming this girl who has no agency to having the information, agency, and skills to be able to be a change maker. So what Voice for Girls does is focus on working with adolescent girls on menstrual health and hygiene, help her understand what growing up is, help her understand what is gender and sexuality and how it traps girls and boys in gender conforming roles, and how to recognize violence, report violence, and prevent violence, but basically understand what her rights are and be able to plan her future. Voice has been able to impact the lives of over 100,000 girls, and we have also started working with the boys because we believe that the conversation is incomplete if we do not address that boys are not just part of the problem but part of the solution, because they also are, there are gender expectations from them as well, but how they can become gender ambassadors. So we've started working with the boys as well. But I think the power of working with girls, and I think that's what leaves me inspired every day, is that when you work with them, they continue to widen the circles of solidarity. So it never stops with one girl. The work never stops with one girl. So I'm going to share with you what one peer leader has done. Her name is Rashita. She's come to voice camps, and she has done such incredible work in the community. But please let me know if you can hear the volume here. Can you hear?
No.
Cannot.
I cannot hear the voice. Anusha, we can't hear anything.
Can't hear anything.
Oh, sorry. One second. So sorry.
Can hear.
We should prevent violence by first we should look to their eyes and we should say no or stop. After that, we should run from that place. Again, we should go where are people and we should say for our trust people only.
Voice for Girls camp, I am speaking more in my school. The teacher was asking DLC group.
మీరు పొలాల పోయి చేసి వాళ్ళు కూడా పొలాల పోయి చేస్తారు. మీరు ఇలా చేస్తున్నట్టే వాళ్ళు ఆడుండాలి. మీరు ఇంట్లో వాళ్ళు కూడా ఆడే ఉంటున్నారు. సో చెయ్యొద్దు. చెప్పేది అదే నేను ఇలా
So this is just one of the thousands of inspiring stories that we hear every day, but I thought it was important to share with you to see, to just show you that, you know, the power of working with girls is that they continue to give this information wherever and whenever they can to communities. And Rakshita has just done a phenomenal job of bringing women. In fact, when her father said, well, you do whatever you do, but don't do it in this village and people will, you know, stop you from accessing. She was very insistent that no, change begins at home with my village. So she brought these women, mothers who have young girls at home to say, please do not marry off your girls when they are young. And I think that really is the genesis for working with young women as well. We've continued to expand the program from working with girls to women because you see that they're showing up for others. And through various programs at Soch for Social Change, which is another organization that I founded, which is a sister organization of Voice for Girls, we're working with young women, helping them understand how they can be impactful leaders in their communities, but also to look at what is social, what is impact, what is transformation, what are the SDGs, and how am I going to act to be able to change my world, but also that of the community. We run several programs, and one of the recent ones we did was also in partnership with the East West Center, and Christina was part of that as well. So I think that's how we bring these communities together to be able to show up for others. I think as I'm looking at the decade ahead, I'm going to look at two affirmations. I'm going to say that very much like what Thinley said. So empowered women must empower other women. I am preparing myself to hand over the organization Voice for Girls and Soch for Social Change to young leaders. I think the time is slowly coming where I know I'm very attached to these causes, and I will continue to be passionate about girls and women and leadership and helping them shape their own lives. But I think the organization will really benefit from fresh breath of air. So though it's going to be a very traumatic experience for me personally, I'm sure the organization will survive. I'm preparing myself to see how I can hand it over to to young blood basically. And I have two beautiful children, a boy and a girl, and they're constantly making me unlearn my feminist lessons and relearn new ones. And I think the decade ahead is going to be important for my partner and I to be positive role models to them and help them really understand that equality begins at home. So this is where I am, and thank you for listening to my stories, and hope some of it was useful for you. So thank you. Over to you, Scott.
Fantastic sharing. Thanks so much, Anusha. That's great. We have a question from Jeremy. He said, what's your expectation of the best policy in order to decrease the percentage of young mothers in India's future?
Great question. And I think really there is no one lever to sort of change. I think the change has to happen at all levels. One, of course, policy. There are amazing laws that will prevent girls from getting married at a young age, prevent abuse, prevent domestic violence. But I think none of it will work until people who uphold these laws actually take it seriously. So if a girl goes and complains about facing sexual violence, she should not be turned away. Or if child marriage happens, you should not be blamed on, oh, they are poor parents and they don't have a choice. So how do you uphold policy? I think that's one level. The second, I think we need to start working with communities to appreciate that, girls have a value, which is much more than just being a homemaker and how she can contribute. I think just seeing that power and providing opportunities for her to be able to live that life. But more importantly, prepare our next generation of boys as well as girls, right? Like, let's not only work with girls and say, well, you have the power, but also work with the boys in helping them become gender ambassadors. I think we are at a stage where all of this has to happen simultaneously.
Great answer and good question. I have one for you, Anusha, as we're all APLP alumni here, or a good percentage of us. Is there a learning from APLP, from your time back in APLP, that still resonates with you and guides you sort of today?
Great question, Scott. And I think that's constantly with me today. And in this phase of my life, I think what APLP helped me do is to pause. I think as leaders, we are constantly fixing and solving problems, and some of it are just problems that need not actually stop at a table. So what is the importance is that leaders need to get away from the everyday and the dance floor and the balcony, like we learned in APLP. We really need to own it. We should be able to step back and be able to reflect on our work. But I think that pause, I think we all need to pause, and that's what APLP taught me. And I think that's what our favorite thing from the time in Hawaii as well is. Reflect.
Great, thanks for that. A pause is important, and I always think of that dance floor and that balcony, as I'm sure many people here today do. So with that, if we can all unmute ourselves, so everybody unmute, and on the count of three, I would like everyone to give a great big mahalo to Thinley, Caitlin, and Anusha for joining us and sharing with us today. So on the count of three, mahalo. Unmute. I see a lot of mics still muted, so unmute there. 1, 2, 3.
Mahalo.
Hello.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much. And the importance of connection and communication. Today is an example of that. An alumni sent me a note probably a month ago saying, why don't you have some of these sessions from alumni, particularly females, and so forth. So had somebody not suggested that, this wouldn't have happened. So thank you so much to the three of you. Really inspirational stories, and thank you for making time. You'll get a thank you email in a day or two. Just a reminder again of our three causes today: Blue Dragon, Global Shapers, and Voice for Girls. The URLs to those are also in the chat window here. So each of those will get $100 today. Thank you so much. We have two more events coming up in this EWCA series, and they're all 1 week away, 1 week and then another 1 week. So the next one is Wisdom and the Future of Aging with Chip Conley. For those of you that are not familiar with Chip, he is a really super interesting character. He started a boutique hotel chain in California called Joie de Vivre, and he had over 50 properties before selling that organization. After which he then joined Airbnb as what he called a modern elder, because he was much older than anyone in that company and helped them understand hospitality. He's also opening centers where older communities can hopefully live more rich lives. He is with us next weekend. He's a very big speaker, so it'll be great if you can join that. And then the final one of this series is with the Polynesian Voyaging Society. We have Navigating Leadership with Bruce Blankenfeld. Bruce is a master navigator, has been on a ton of voyages with PVS, and he's going to share some of his stories of leadership that they encounter while on the high seas, and also let us know about the next global voyage that they have. So that is in 2 weeks' time. Remember to engage and connect. Please, if you enjoyed something about this, make a little post about it. Hashtag APLP, hashtag EWCA, pardon me. And you can follow the APLP YouTube channel. You can see the address in there. As well, we have a new APLP alumni board. You can email them at aplpalumni@gmail.com. They're looking for ideas, and stay connected. One more reminder, APLP G20 is a green light. It is a go, May 22nd to September 9th, with a pre-residency virtual connection, 2 months in residency, and then 2 weeks virtually at the end. November 2nd application deadline. The majority of good applicants come from alumni. So please tell anyone you think is interested. And if you just Google APLP G20, you will find more details. And also, again, if you have any event, invitation, a publication, or an award you would like the larger EWC Alumni Network to know about, email Christine and team at alumni@eastwestcenter.org. So with that, a big mahalo to our 3 speakers again. Thank you, Thinley, Caitlin, and Anusha. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your busy days to join us, strengthen our connections, and learn a little bit from one another. We will see you in 1 week's time. Until then, mahalo, stay healthy, happy, and productive, everybody.
Thanks, Scott.
Hello, thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Scott.
Aloha.